Hi friends, it's Kai. Today I'll show you how to edit birds into images through Photoshop. This is my first Photoshop editorial, so I'm probably going to make some mistakes. My apologies in advance. What you will need is two images. One is your base image, which you will Photoshop the birds onto. The other image is birds, so something like this. If you don't have any stock images of birds, I've uploaded the exact same image onto Dropbox, which I'll provide a link in the descriptions of this video. So let's get started. What I normally do first is I would just edit and color correct the raw file or whatever the image I want to Photoshop birds onto. I usually do it through Camera Raw or Lightroom. So this is my color corrected and processed image of the original. I essentially just applied a preset which brought out the blues and the yellows, and I added a gradient filter on top. Once you're finished editing your base layer, you want to save whatever adjustments you made into a preset, and then apply the same thing to your bird's image, because if you have the same tones and coloring on both images, it makes it a lot easier to work with, and it makes it a lot easier to combine them together. So I used preset 1, which I will apply for the birds again. Now we position the birds. So lower the opacity to maybe 50%, somewhere around that, so you can see both images. I like to put my birds a bit over the clouds. I like some of them covering the highlights, and I'll show you guys why later. So something like this. Now that we got the position of the birds down, we'll be playing with the blending mode. Let's move the opacity back to 100%, and for the blending mode, we'll be using multiply. I really like multiply because it does two things. It hides the lighter colors and it brings out the darker colors. Since birds are, if you photograph birds during sunset, they're pretty underexposed and quite dark. So that's why when you choose multiply, it's a really good way to a really quick and simple way to just separate the background, which is the sky, and the birds. So to completely remove, or to remove most of the sky, which is, I'll show you, which is like the bluish and the yellowish here, all we have to do is raise the brightness. So we can either do this through curves or levels, but what I find most useful is actually just putting this file back into Camera Raw. I raise the highlights, and then I raise some white. You don't really want to overdo it because you'll lose the details in the blacks, which is the birds. So just do something subtle, maybe like a 28, and then for highlights you can go a little bit higher, maybe 60. Then we apply that. So now you can see that a lot more of the background layer is actually showing now. And the next step is we actually use layer mask. We're going to be using the magic wand tool, which will be removing um, we'll be isolating the birds. I set the tolerance to 15 because that's around the sensitivity of that is around um, is pretty much what I probably it's like I use the tolerance 15 because that's probably the sensitivity that I find works best for removing the sky and leaving as much details for the birds as possible. So I'll show you guys. What tolerance is the higher the value, the more color it'll select. Oh, so if you put it at maybe let's say 7, it'll only select a small area. So versus if you do tolerance 87, let's say, it'll select a way broader range because it's just it's more like it's not as sensitive. So we'll be doing 15. Once you selected it, you'll color the selection black on the layer mask, which will hide it. If you're using a Mac, a shorthand to fill in the selection is Option Delete, which will fill in the selection with your first color, which is black. Anything above we'll probably not need, so I'll just use a brush tool to just paint black over like all this. You can see that this the magic wand tool left some whites here, and there's a and by changing the layer from normal back to multiply, it will it'll make it'll hide all the white areas. So that's another reason why multiply is such a convenient blending mode. So once we isolate the birds, I tend to hide hide some birds. I always mask birds that are flying kind of sideways, something like these ones. Essentially, we'll be decreasing the density of the birds so that it's not that messy. So any birds that are kind of flying a little weird, we'll be hiding it, and we'll probably hide most of them. Maybe leave 6 or 7-ish. Let's zoom out and check how the birds are. I think we have to remove a few more. Let's remove the bottom one, and yeah, I think that's good. So we reposition it a bit, and I feel like birds are a tiny bit larger than they should be, so we resize it, something like that. If any of these darker areas show up, it's just things that we didn't mask over, so just paint black over it and it'll be gone again. Now that we isolated the birds and we chose all the good ones, there's one more step, which is we have to take lighting into account. So you can see that the sun is kind of shining the light here and here. Just to make it more realistic, birds that are kind of in the highlighted areas of the clouds should probably get lightened up. So a quick and easy method is if you could just double click the bird image. We go to blend if, the underlying layer. We take the the right slider and we click option. If you're using a Mac, click the left triangle and we drag to the left. How this works is as you drag the slider to the left, the image that you're on will slowly fade away, and the more you drag to the left, it fades in darker areas. So if you drag it a little bit, it'll only fade in the highlights. If you drag it to the end, it'll fade in maybe the midtones. So for our purpose, since we're doing clouds, we'll probably drag it to maybe 195, and then I'll show you the difference. It's just some small details that just makes it that much more believable. At this point, you're pretty much done. What I normally would still do is I would adjust the colors a bit, raise the highlights, maybe apply a preset or two. I hope you found this video helpful. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave a comment down below. And I'll try to upload tutorials maybe once a week, starting now. If you want to keep up to date, feel free to subscribe. And looking forward to making more tutorials like these. Cheers.